I was arrested in Eno's diner. Those are the first words of Lee Child's 1997 book Killing Floor. It was the first book I read from Lee Child in the Jack Reacher series, and needless to say, it not only kicked off my fascination with him as an author, as a writer, as a storyteller, but it also kicked off one of the most successful franchises ever written, ever, of all time. And so this video is going to be about for writers. It's going to be for aspiring writers, people who are interested in writing and storytelling but don't really know quite what their style is yet. And maybe you're someone who likes the crime thriller genre. Well, in that case, this is for you. Who is Lee Child? If you don't know, if you've been living under a rock, some people do like to live under rocks. I'm one of those people. He's essentially one of the most popular commercial fiction writers of our generation, and potentially he's up there with being one of the top of all time in terms of the amount of books he's sold. And he's done that by writing one character, the Jack Reacher character, now also a series on Amazon Prime. He's essentially built an international brand worth billions of dollars, all from one character. And this video is going to be a bit about how Lee Child writes, his process, his methods, some of the things I think he says which are highly underrated, just as little snippets of wisdom, and what we can learn from that. So without any further ado, let's go. Lesson number one: you have to be a reader. This is the singular most important and fundamental and the only qualification you need to be a successful writer and storyteller. Are you a reader? Have you read books your entire life? Have you been glued to the pages of your books ever since you were small, and you simply love books and you can't get enough of them? If so, you're ready to write. That's all he says you need. You don't need a fancy degree, you don't need to take any special courses, you certainly don't need to spend lots and lots of money on fancy equipment and computers and note takers and anything like that. You just need to have been a reader in order to write a book. When you are a reader, especially from a younger age, and you read hundreds if not thousands of books across your entire lifetime, essentially what you're doing when you get into your 20s, late 20s, early 30s and beyond is you've essentially built an unconscious bank of stories, of plot lines, of characters, of dialogue, things which, if you were to sit down and try and learn it, you just wouldn't be able to. There's too much information to cram in, too many subtleties and nuances which, if you want to be in particular a crime thriller writer and you want your work to be resonated across lots of different audiences, you simply need to have that knack and that ability to write, and that simply comes from being a reader your whole life. Trust yourself and be guided by instinct. That is the main message when it comes to being a writer, and that comes from being a reader. Lesson number two: write the slow stuff fast and the fast stuff slow. What does this mean? I think Lee Child is very clever the way that he words certain things, in particular the way he gives advice to aspiring writers, and he often takes things, normal sentences, and he just flips them on their head. So write the slow stuff fast and the fast stuff slow. What does that mean? He's essentially saying the boring parts of your work, bearing in mind we're talking about commercial fiction, not literary prose or any of that rubbish. We're talking about popular commercial fiction for a wide audience. He's saying when it comes to the slow bits, when it comes to taking your character from point A to point B, from one scene to another, write it quick. Get them from one room into the other and do it as quickly and efficiently as possible. These are the boring parts of your novel, and they should be skimmed through as seamlessly as possible. That doesn't mean make it bad, it just simply means make it quick. And what does he mean by write the fast stuff slow? Well, if it's in particular an action scene, something which is dramatic and loud and quick and fast and shocking as it should be, write those bits slow. There's many instances where Lee Child writes a fight scene, something which in real time may only last a few seconds. He spends pages devoted to fleshing out that particular scene. Why? Because that's the stuff people buy the book for. They want to see the action scenes, they want to see Reacher beat up bad guys, they want to see him do other things with other people, won't go into that, and that's why people buy his books. So you flesh those out, you make those scenes last, and the boring stuff like how Reacher gets from a car to a room and to a restaurant and a shop and one scene to another, that's stuff that he glides through seamlessly and quickly and effectively. Lesson number three: character is king. This is something which I think is an amazing piece of advice from Lee. It's essentially saying your characters are the reason, especially when it comes to series fiction, why readers will buy those books and why they'll get invested in those books and why they'll keep coming back for more. Why is that? Look, ingenious plots, no matter how original they may seem to you, nothing is original. Lee Child loves this particular example. He says that Theseus and the Minotaur is essentially the same plot as James Bond. He says it's about a man coming in to solve a problem, defeat a villain. There's a damsel in distress who he uses for his own purposes. There's even a big, intricate layer where a villain hides, i.e. the labyrinth. And of course, Theseus comes in, he slays the Minotaur, and he saves the day. And that is essentially the plot for James Bond. Theseus and the Minotaur, if you don't know, was written thousands of years ago, and obviously James Bond was not. Characters are what differentiates your work from another person's work, and it's why people get invested. Don't get too hung up on the plot lines itself. Don't try and be clever with it. Don't try and do things which, I've got to write it a certain way because other people have done it this way. Write the way you want to write the plot, because at the end of the day, when it comes to commercial fiction and popular fiction in a series, people are invested in the characters. That's why they pick up the book, and that's why they can't put the book down again. If you don't have compelling characters that people want to read about, doesn't matter how ingenious your plots are, they're just not going to stick around. So, flesh out the characters. Think about all your experience as a reader, the subconscious bank that we talked about earlier, and think about characters from your own life and make them big, exaggerate them, make them caricatures of themselves, because that's what people love to read about. Next, lesson number 4. The man with no plot. Lee Child is famous for this. His method is that he doesn't outline his stories. This is something which has been, I don't want to say debunked, because I believe Lee Child when he says he doesn't have an outline. I do believe him completely. But other people, other authors in particular, they like to take him down. Everyone's method is different. And you know, these authors, they're notorious for writing 17, 18, 19 drafts of their work. They plan it out meticulously. Frederick Forsyth, he was like that. He liked to know exactly what he was going to write, exactly when he was going to write it. And so he had a very detailed, intricate outline before he sat down to write his book. Lee Child has the opposite approach. He likes to make it up on the fly as he goes along. He had an outline for Killing Floor only in the sense that the very bare bones of what he wanted to create, very loosely, but in terms of a plot, in terms of character development, in terms of the characters in the story at all, he didn't really have any plan whatsoever. Instinct as a reader over the outline that you're trying to stick to. And he says it makes the writing process far more enjoyable because he doesn't know what's going to happen from one page to the next. So when a reader comes to him and says, "Oh Lee, yeah, I loved your book, but I figured it out in the first 20 pages," he can turn around to them and say, "Well, that makes one of us." And it's quite funny. No outline, no plan, just action, moving forward all the time. I think writers have this tendency to procrastinate. They sit down and they think, "Oh, if I plan out exactly what I'm going to write, then I won't procrastinate." And that's something maybe you should just avoid. Sit down and write and see where the story takes you. And there you have it, a very basic rundown of how to write like Lee Child. Now, it's a bit of a weird video. I haven't really gone into too much about this, only because he's spoken about how to write, and I guess by implication how to write like him, on many other forums with many other interviewers. He's been writing for a very long time now, nearly 30 to 40 years. So of course he's had many interviews when he's discussed his writing in far more detail than I could lay out here. But my point is, I wanted to pick out some key bits which I think are fundamental to his writing process and how you can copy that as well and emulate that style if you want to. Be a reader, write the slow stuff fast and the fast stuff slow. Prioritize your characters because they're the things that will keep readers coming back for more. You don't need to get hung up on your plot. That's something which can essentially be an obstacle to your work. Instead, prioritize your instinct as a reader over sticking rigidly to a plot, and then you'll find that not only will the words come quicker, but you'll finish that book instead of getting hung up on it. I think if you're an aspiring writer, you should listen to what he has to say. He's got loads of gems out there. I've barely scratched the surface of what he has had to say about being a crime thriller commercial writer, but the stuff's out there and it's well worth a watch. Other things as well, the book is the thing. Commit 100% to that book. And your job as a writer is to connect with that reader, and especially when you're trying to write commercial fiction, you need to connect with as many people as possible. It's not easy, it's difficult, but with a strong work ethic with a lot of black coffee and with your past as a reader giving you confidence, there's nothing you can't do. Trust yourself, work hard, and win. Get familiar with his advice, draw on his wisdom, and follow his example, and maybe you'll be as successful as him.